All right, let's go to item number 12. Okay. Fanita Ranch Workshop number 3. This has to deal with parks, trails, and open space. Melanie?
PowerPoint up and ready. 1 second.
Well, we didn't take enough time to get you ready on that other one?
Okay. Okay, thank you. Good evening again. The purpose of tonight's workshop is to provide information on the parks, trails, and open space that is proposed for the Fanita Ranch development. The city will present the first few slides, essentially to describe the project components that promote physical activity and enjoyment of nature. HomeFed will present more details in their remaining slides. As a reminder, this workshop is informational and no decisions are made tonight. This is our ongoing commitment to inform the community and you about the many aspects of the Fanita Ranch development. So recall that the overall site plan is encompassing 2,638 acres to be accessed by extensions of Fanita Parkway, Magnolia, and Cuyamaca Street. The Fanita Ranch villages are denoted in color and named Fanita Commons, Vineyard Village, Orchard Village, and there is a special use area designated in the southern portion of the property. These villages and special use area are visually dominant on this exhibit. The focus now is to shift the eye to the softer sides of the proposal. The general plan establishes goals relative to the provision of parks and recreational facilities. For example, in the recreation element, there is a method for determining the acreage of parks and recreation required to serve the population demand. Based on the proposed 2,949 units, a minimum of 47 acres of developed parks and recreational facilities would be required. As proposed, the Fanita Ranch development will offer 52.4 acres. And all parks within the development will be improved by HomeFed and accessed by the public. One of the policies in the trails element is the provision of trails with planned development to provide safe and direct access to both the community and the regional trails. Currently, this proposal includes 35 miles of trails in a variety of ways: sidewalks, nature trails, and primitive trails. These will all be described in future slides in this presentation. And lastly, the conservation element contains a citywide policy in support of the protection of biological resources. This element establishes a target of 2,600 acres in our city, and these are to be preserved in permanent open space. The proposed project sets aside almost 1,600 acres, or 61%, toward meeting this target, which will be permanently established and managed by methods to be determined by the developer and the city. So I wanted to just bring those numbers to the forefront by summarizing them in this table. It encapsulates everything I just said so that everyone remembers it in the test in the future. Okay. So that was my at-a-glance slide. Okay. The next slide shows that the permanently conserved areas are popping out as bright green here, and the result of this is that the slopes will be preserved adjacent to the homes that abut the property, especially to the south and to the east, so that hillside views would remain an important part of the Santee viewshed. The following slides illustrate before and after views of these hillsides, one showing a distant view from State Route 125 coming into Santee, and one showing the view from Cuyamaca Street looking north, and I will show those now. Okay. So here we are on 125 heading down towards Mission Gorge Road, and this is an existing condition. Click again. The Fanita Ranch development, once built, you can maybe not see it so well here for those in the audience, but that area there would be an area where the houses could be seen in the distance. Okay. The next slide is from Cuyamaca Street, looking northward, and
Melanie?
yes,
I'm
sir.
sorry. So go back to that last one. There you go, right there.
Uh-huh.
Is that supposed to be a rendering of the after?
Yes.
Of
So
what the actual view
afterward.
would be like after it's developed?
Yes. You can't
Oh.
really see it.
There is. Oh, do that again. Do whatever. There you go. All right, got it.
Sorry.
Doing that. You see that now?
Okay, and put the.
All right.
Okay. So we're trying to show you where it would be with that oval, and at this distance you really can't see very much. So the next slide again is you're standing on Cuyamaca looking northward, and the project improvements as once built would look like this. You see the trees in the street and the circle showing some ridgetop homes up there. That would be one of the views of the site once it's developed. Okay. We'll move on. All right, keep going. Sorry. So this is a close-up of the trails component of the project. This is the northern portion of the property, and within the site, trails will be either concrete and those which are compacted earth or disintegrated granite. This shows the northern portion where the on-site trails will facilitate connections to the regional trails such as Stowe Trail, Gooden Ranch, and trails to the Sycamore Canyon County Preserve. This portion of the exhibit is the southern portion of the site where the primitive trails are proposed. The blue asterisk on this exhibit is located in the special use area, shown in white, is the location of a fully improved trailhead with parking on an extension of Carlton Hills Boulevard. Some of the amenities that you would see at the trailhead, such as this, are shown in the next slide. Kiosks, informational kiosks, picnic tables, shade structures. Now, there are many dead-end streets along the Fanita Ranch property, as many as 26, as these blue dots illustrate. The city and HomeFed are evaluating which of these street ends might make sense for controlled access to the site and onto the primitive trails. So this is a work in progress, and we stay tuned once as we move forward with that analysis. Okay. So stay tuned and stay informed. This is the slide I always end with. It's my cue to turn it over to HomeFed for their portion of the presentation. Just to let you know, our next workshop will be on fire and public safety issues, and coming up in probably early January. But at this point, I will turn it over to HomeFed.
Thanks, Melanie. Jeff, before you get started, I just want to let everybody know we do have 18 speaker slips, and so we're not going to be accepting any more speaker slips on this item, and we're going to hold our speakers to 2 minutes. Otherwise, we're going to be here extremely late tonight. So thank you very much for your patience.
Maybe more
Go
water.
ahead.
I was going to finish this. My throat was starting to get dry.
Thank you, Melanie. Good evening, Mayor, City Council, and staff. I'd also like to thank Melanie and Bill Mertz that we have spent hours on with the trails and with the figuring out the trails and the park system for Fanita Ranch. Also, I'd like to thank Davies Group who put together the presentation tonight. One other thanks is all the people behind me who have decided to stay until after 9:30 tonight when they could have been home watching the World Series. With that said, my presentation will take about 15 minutes, and it will talk about four main components. First slide here, once again, is the outline of Fanita Ranch. It takes up about a quarter of the city's area and 90% of the remaining open space. These are the four topics we are going to talk about tonight: open space, trails, agriculture, and parks. This is the open space. Melanie's slide sort of showed a similar item. We have 76% of our site will be dedicated to native open space, parks, and our community farm. Also, we will have 1,700 acres, which will be native open space, which is throughout our community, and that will be untouched. It will never be built on. It will contain the trail system, but nothing else into perpetuity. We're going to talk a little bit more about the open space as we go through the slides, but right now I would like to discuss the trail system. We have 35 miles of trails that are planned for Fanita Ranch, and these trails will be open to the entire public, not just Fanita Ranch people, but anyone that wishes to use them. The trails will be of various surfaces, actually two different surfaces. There'll be a native decomposed granite or concrete, and it will depend on where those trails are located for what that surface will be. Our trails will be for hiking, biking, and any kind of recreation. The first trail Melanie spoke about are the primitive trails. These are trails in the native open space. They will be DG or dirt trails. They'll be very narrow, 2 to 3 feet wide, and they will be generally on where existing trails are today. So we won't be making very many new trails in the primitive trail for the primitive trails, only where existing trails are today. The next one we're going to talk about are native nature trails. These nature trails are in blue. It's a little bit hard to see, but these nature trails are, again, soft surface trails, DG, or dirt. They're approximately 4 feet wide, and they will connect the development area to the primitive trails.
Why only 4 feet wide?
They vary a little bit, but we're trying to keep them narrow for the actual use of the trail. Some of our some of the other trails I'll talk about tonight are much wider than that. We are going to have 2 creek crossings, one in the northern part of our development and then one in our southern part of our development that cross creeks. They also provide access to the school, access to the park, so that people can walk instead of drive. Village nature trails. These are, again, nature trails. They'll be soft surface. They'll be a little bit wider, in the neighborhood of 6 feet wide, and they will connect the different villages together. This is a rendering of a paved trail that could go through our community. Perimeter trails. This perimeter trail, our perimeter trail system is generally through the northeast section of our community called Vineyard Village. And what we are doing is it's going to be in the fire management zone. It's going to be a bench about 20 to 30 feet below the building pads. So people on the trail will not be able to look in people's backyards, and people in the backyards won't be able to see the people using the trails. And they will go all around the northeastern portion of our development, and there'll be fantastic views. They're about 300 or 400 feet above everything else in the area. Village access trails, these are when we go into the hard surface trails. These trails are concrete, and they are approximately, they vary from 6 to 8 feet wide, depending on where they are, and again, they will connect the villages together. We're trying to get people out of their cars and start using bikes and their legs. Multi-purpose trails, these are the trails that are going to be generally adjacent to Fanita Parkway and Cuimaca. Again, they'll be concrete, and they will vary from 8 foot to 12 foot wide. Our trail system is designed to connect to other trails in the area, including Gooden Ranch to the north and Mission Trails Park to the south. This is the trail map. I know it's a little hard to see. Fanita Ranch is in the middle. You can see the green in Fanita Ranch is our open space where we'll have most of our trail system. To the north is Gooden Ranch, and you can see that our development has as much green as Gooden Ranch. It's about, we have the same amount of open space as Gooden Ranch does. And then Mission Trails Park is on the bottom left-hand corner. Mission Trails Park is huge. It's bigger than ours, but we're connecting these parks together. And also the long skinny green part on the southern part, that is San Diego River Park, where the city has a trail system that we will be accessing as well. Now we're going to start talking about the farm. Before we do that, though, the pink area here is what we call the ag meander trails. These are trails that I just spoke about. If you've seen some communities where they have different stations along their trails, they might have a station to do sit-ups, a station to do push-ups, maybe to do chin-ups. They're trying to get people healthy while they're hiking. Well, we're doing the same thing with a little bit different concept. What we're doing here is we are going to teach people and educate them about farming and about agriculture. So along this pink trail area, we are going to have stations that talk about farming and talk about growing crops. They'll also have certain areas where we will have certain crops along the trail. We might have fruit trees or different vegetables or different landscaping that goes with the farm. This is very unique. This really hasn't been done anywhere in San Diego and not very much in California. So now we're going to talk more about our community farm. Community farm is located in Fanita Commons, known as our town center. 25 acres just for the farm part. The two brown arrows, the one in the lower level is a trail from the school, and the one in the top is a trail from the active adult neighborhood. What we're trying to do is we're trying to get people to understand and learn and engage in the farm. And that includes having a system set up with a school district to bring the kids in after school, which is going to be close to the farm, to teach them about farming. Some of the amenities in the farm. We'll have a event barn. This could be used for different events such as weddings. On the weekends, we will bring the farmer in, and he can get a group of people and explain what is going on in the farm and how it's going to benefit the community. We'll have vegetable crops in the middle, orchards around the outsides. There will be a farmer's market on the farm, and there will also be a farm-to-table restaurant adjacent in our town center. Vineyard Village will be just that. There will be vineyards as you go into the to Vineyard Village. They'll be along the slopes, and this will be part of the farm as well. So what we're trying to do as we move into the next section is we have an agrarian-themed living community where we're putting our land to work for the benefit of the community, and that all starts with farming. Now we're going to talk about parks. We have one community park, 36 acres in size, 8 neighborhood parks which are about 4 acres each, and then we have 31 mini parks or passive parks. So let's talk about the community park, 36 acres. 36-acre park is about the size of 36 football fields or 34 soccer fields. It's really going to be a large park. This is the playground section. The playgrounds are going to be in this location. These are some of the components of the community park. We're going to have lighted sports fields and ball courts located in the south and northern section. We absolutely are going to have a great dog park, open, like I said, to all the public, not just Fanita Ranch residents.
Sorry to interrupt, but how does that compare to Town Center Park? How big is Town Center Park? 55 acres, so a little smaller than Town Center Park.
Right. We also have what we call the passive park knoll. This is an area that we're leaving native. It's about 80 to 100 feet higher than the town center. There will be a trail system up there. There will be park benches and picnic tables, and you'll have a 360-degree view of everything in Fanita Ranch. It'll be absolutely stunning. This park will be built by us. It will be turned over to the city, and the city will manage this park. The rest of the parks that we're going to look at now, the 8 neighborhood parks, which are 4 or so acres, 4 football fields in size. We have 8 of those. Those will be built by us, and they'll be maintained by our HOA. We're taking some of the burden off the city, so we're going to maintain them, but they'll be open to all the public. Same thing with the mini parks. They're a little bit smaller. So let's take a look at one of the neighborhood parks. This one's located in Orchard Village. These parks are in the dark green. You can see the 2 on the either side, and there's a long linear park in the upper corner. That long linear park is adjacent to a creek, and the little gray thing going in the north-south direction, that's the bridge that we're going to build. So we're going to look at the one in the bottom left-hand corner. This could be what it looks like. This is a rendering, but we're working with Bill in community development right now on what's going to be built in the parks. You can see they're big enough to have active fields. They will have a neighborhood plaza, a playground, picnic area, and some of the neighborhood parks will have bathroom facilities. Now we're going to look at a passive, smaller park in Vineyard Village. Again, the dark green are the different parks. You can see there's a lot of them, and some are larger and some are smaller. We're going to look at the passive park in the bottom corner. This is what it could look like. It's relatively large in size. There will be open play area. There will be picnic benches, seating areas. There will also be, most of the parks in Vineyard Village will be trail points or points that will begin or end your trails. And again, these are phenomenal views all across the Vineyard Village. So we're almost at the conclusion of my presentation. I just want to again show you the description of the open space and how everything fits together on an acreage standpoint in Fanita Ranch. Over 2,000 acres will be dedicated to open space, habitat preserve, parks, and agriculture. Only 340 acres will be residential. The 32 acres that Melanie talked about, the special use area in the south, that will be, right now is programmed for solar and possibly recreational vehicle storage. And then we have about 50 acres or so in our town center, village center, and school. So that concludes my presentation. I'll be here to answer questions. I think you're probably going to go to public comment now. Okay, thank you.
We can have people line up, please. Van Collinsworth, Derek Hodge, Karen Schroeder, Jim Whalen.
18.
Van Collinsworth, representing Preserve Wild Santee. As you're aware, we have a very different vision for Fanita Ranch. And obviously it's been a long haul this last 25 years with a lot of the residents hoping for basically conservation of the entire property. So, you know, how many communities can you think of that have a regional park, have a state river park conservancy, and the opportunity for a state park or something like that? I can't think of any other than ours. I mean, we are a very unique place, and we have this land that we have conserved to this point can be a special opportunity for us because we can conserve the whole thing. We don't have to grade however much it is. And part of the question that I have here too is, you know, I see this been about the 76%, but I think that number is going to come down when you start to look at, you know, fire buffers and, you know, what you start to look at what is actually conserved for the wildlife there. And I would bet that that's going to be closer to around 60, 62% of the site that's actually conserved. This site that you see, or this design, has tremendous amount of edge effect. So there's a lot of endangered species, threatened species on this site. So we talked about the knoll. That's the site for Kino checker spot butterfly. The supposed to be a...
Next is Karen Schroeder.
Well, I'll just...
Thank you, Van.
You've heard a lot from me tonight, so I would just like to see it all conserved, and I think that's we could actually do that.
Karen Schroeder.
Thank you, Mayor and Council and management and staff and audience. My name's Karen Schroeder, longtime Fanita Ranch homeowner. And I do want to acknowledge HomeFed and Jeff O'Connor. The last time I spoke was back in May, and the very next day I saw up in the hills where I live, I saw like a little bobcat or a little bulldozer kind of going around and creating like a fire break up in the hills where I live, and I'm very grateful and appreciative for that. That being said, the project, it's fantastic. It's absolutely fantastic. The problem I see is that all of this is just like icing on top of a mud pie, because there's no mitigation for the fact there is no north evacuation escape site possible. There are two on the side. In terms of insuring the potential homeowners, I have no clarity about how and if and when homeowners will even be able to afford or even get policies. Policies in Santee right now are being canceled. I live right by the hills in the very high fire danger area. I'm still kind of waiting and thinking that my policy might be canceled at any minute. And then what am I going to do? I just think it's warranted to stay 100% open, or maybe some little small day use commercial ventures. Because if so much is being open, then why not maybe create some type of day use, whether it's, I don't know, anything crazy like zip lining or some kind of hiking, biking, or some commercial enterprise, and just leaving an open space with some, you know, zoning for commercial use, and then there's not the liability for all the homeowners, the 3,000 homes that are going to go up there. And I thank you for your time.
Next is Jim Whalen.
It's been a long night. I'll try and be quick. It's Jim Whalen, J. Whalen Associates, this time for HomeFed. I've worked on this property since 1989. This is different from previous efforts. I take exception to what Van says. The open space is about 50% more than it was in the Newland and Barrett plans. The trails are going to be managed where they're not now. The destruction of the property in front of our very faces will be stopped. For those who do care about habitat conservation, each one of these trails was carefully sited to avoid areas of future conservation. There are sensitive species there, and the trails are designed to avoid them. And the last thing I'll say is that the city can do almost everything that Van wants without thwarting its own future ambitions and hurting its economy. Thank you very much.
Patty LaBeouf. Next is Ben Stone, Janet Garvin, and Mark Finch.
Good evening again. I have a couple of concerns. Where is the through, with coyotes and other kinds of wildlife, where is the movement going? It looks like you have this, the habitat preserved in the southern portion of the property. And how will the animals move through to the north? Are they going to go through right through the community? So I just don't see how, well, what I see is that we're bordering up this the habitat preserve in the southern part, and we're casing in the animals and surrounding them with humans. Also, what are the conservation measures that HomeFed is going to take to protect the habitat? I would like to hear more about their plans for conservation. How are you going to keep people away from the areas that do have endangered species? I haven't heard anything about that element. In general, I am opposed to putting 3,000 homes up into this area. I think the proposals that HomeFed have put together are very forward-thinking and progressive. I do see why people in Santee, it would appeal to them, but the part that just doesn't work is 3,000 homes in this area. It's just not safe. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ben Stone.
As you're coming up, Ben, Jeff, are you making notes of these questions? Okay, and if you have an answer for those, I'll have you come up last and try and answer those. Thank you. Go ahead, Ben.
Good evening. My name is Ben Stone. I work for the San Diego Mountain Biking Association as our trails coordinator. I believe the last time I was up here speaking was when the City Council approved the easement for the Stowe Trail connection, when we reached an agreement with the Marines for access. That was quite a large feat, and we thank you guys for your continued work to between that and HomeFed to keep that trail open for all the residents of Santee, and that is an incredibly important connection. Tonight, I'm here to speak about trails. I look back in my calendar to kind of see when it was, and I've been working with the applicants since 2015 on trails through this area, and I have to say they have continued to take our feedback. They've been very open to what our members are sort of interested in who live in the area specific to trails. And I think it's been a great model for other applicants on how to approach the community and take this feedback. The trails that are in this area are a gem. The proposal in front of us tonight has additional trails, and although it hasn't been codified in the final EIR, we are hopeful that this, what we're seeing right now is the trails plan that would move forward, and we are very supportive of the trails and the trail connections. We've worked exhaustively with the county as well for connections and trailheads through Sycamore Ranch to make these through connections also from Mission Trails. I mean, this is Mission Trails Master Plan update that was just approved by City Council a couple months back. Huge connections through this community and very vital and important to everyone who lives in this area and our members. Thank you.
Ben, before you go, did you work with San Diego on that plan also?
Yes, we worked exhaustively on the Mission Trails Master Plan, and I also spent a lot of time with City of Poway and the county on the Sycamore Ranch plan. And actually, there's a trail one day that will be legal to get you all the way through Sycamore Ranch and over into Poway, into the communities of Poway, all without touching a road, most likely.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Janet Garvin. Mark Finch. Next is Michelle Purchase and Sean Paul Chambers.
Good evening, Mayor, council members. My name is Mark Finch, and I've lived in Lakeside since 1975, so I've seen a lot of change around here. I remember the days of Mission Gorge when there was nothing but a KCBQ and a roller rink. So back in 1980, you made a big, bold move to incorporate, and now the difference between Santee and Lakeside is pretty evident. I happen to be in the building industry. I build commercial buildings for a living. I've been doing that for 40 years. This plan that Home Fed has put together is extremely unique. And if I was bestowed the honor to be on this council, I would be extremely proud to support this development. I think it's really, really unique, and I hope it passes. Thank you.
Michelle
I'm sorry,
Purchase.
hold on before you leave. Are you one of the builders for this development?
No.
Okay.
No,
so
all
you're
I
not-
do is commercial buildings.
Okay,
I
thank
don't
you.
touch houses.
I believe he left me extra time. Just kidding. I'm going to throw out a bunch of questions, so write down, Jeff, furiously. Who was the consultation person on the trail placement? I'd like to know that person's background. And
I'm sorry, Michelle, can you not hold on to the mic? Because
Sorry about that. Who's going to maintain those trails? Who's going to make sure that there's no illegal activities like camping and various types of harassment? Who knows? In terms of the open space, who's going to maintain that? What's the management plan? And we want details, right? Are citizens going to be in charge of this? People on the HOA going to be in charge of this? For the farm, how are you going to control any toxic runoff? What I mean by that is excess fertilizer from the farm onto native areas. In general, I believe this area should be 100% open space with the nature center for us all to enjoy. We can have access to trails then. Would provide some education, citizen science type of programs for students and also the general public. Your plan as proposed really does fragment the habitat. So for all the lovely people wearing the open space for Santee, little badges provided by Home Fed, if you really cared about open space, you wouldn't want this project because it's really going to interrupt the flow of organisms between all those wonderful natural areas that we all appreciate and enjoy. I think, also, your ridgetop construction is likely to impact vernal pool habitats. I know most people don't know about vernal pool habitats, but if you ever saw one, you would be delighted. And I hope they are maintained. Okay, thank you.
Sean Paul Chambers, and then Linda Merkel.
Mr. Mayor, Council, thank you so much for your time. My wife and I were really interested in the plans. We're interested in what Home Fed has already done. We went to their portfolio online and found the village of Ascaya in Chula Vista and drove down, visited that. It's amazing. It's beautiful. We would love to raise our family there or something like that. The layout is very well planned, very holistic, very community oriented, and it's brand new. And then we also found that Home Fed did the Centalijo Hills up in San Marcos, and we went up there, and it's been there for about 10, 15 years now, I believe, and it's just amazing to see what it's become, and we're really excited about the potential for something like that in Santee. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Linda Merkel.
Good evening. My name is Linda Markel, and what no one has spoke about is in the general plan, 1,400 homes could go onto that site on much larger lots, which would stop us from having any open space at all, no trail systems, no working farm, and also our 36-acre public park. So it's been a long time in Santee that we have received anything of this magnitude as a community, and I feel that if we sit on it too long and it goes away, the general plan will be dropping 1,400 homes on much larger lots, which will take away all the 52 freeway being dealt with, the farm, and all the open space, and we'll be left with like Carton Hills, which I experienced when I was younger. It was our open space, and it developed, and it's a community. This is far, far more acceptable for us as citizens in Santee to have. And all of the benefits that we will receive from this project. I've been against Fanita Ranch for over 25 years, and this is the first time that these developers have stepped it up. And I hope that our council realizes that we could lose all this and they could just build. They could start building in a month if they want, but they're holding off, and they're holding off for a better community for us to enjoy it. Thank you.
Sandy Schulke, and then Allison Liebrecht is next.
Is Sandy here? Okay, go ahead.
Good evening. I'm Allison Liebrecht. Mayor and City Council, thank you for having me today. As a resident of District 1 and as a member of the San Diego Mountain Biking Association, I have many concerns also that some of my neighbors here have shared. However, I will keep to the discussion of trails and open space for today. There are many existing trails that have been built and maintained by multi-use trail users, and that would be mountain bikers, hikers, runners, bird watchers, etc., using sustainable methods and should be kept in the plan. These are single-track trails and, to Councilman Hall, less than 4 feet wide, that have less of an environmental impact than the fire roads and easement roads that also exist there. They are heavily used by residents, wildlife, and bring visitors from out of the area, which also brings business and serves as additional eyes to help prevent fires, as well as the trails giving breaks and access to the more remote areas. The trails and parks are one of the #1 reasons why we moved to Santee. They are a part of what keeps families here to stay and play, enhancing the quality of life of our community, hopefully, though, with less homes and a second sportsplex that maybe can be used in a different manner. I do appreciate your time and consideration to keep as many of these sustainable trails in Fanita Ranch and Santee at large. Thank you.
Next is Mike Root, and he has a handout. And then Dan Bickford, if you can come sit up here, please, and John Olson.
I'm not speaking for or against Fanita Ranch. However, I would like to point out that the city does not keep their promises regarding developments. And to get there, you make developers spend money on studies, reports, a habitat manager in perpetuity, for example, in Sky Ranch. You drive up the costs, so who profits? You've got consultants, bureaucrats, and attorneys. So what you get is the worst of both worlds. You drive up the cost, and then your oversight sucks. Let me give you some examples from Sky Ranch. You had a habitat manager, again, funded by Lennar, who's supposed to be there in perpetuity. He's supposed to attend meetings, he doesn't. He's supposed to hand out brochures, he doesn't. He's supposed to educate the community, he doesn't. All of the things he was supposed to do, he doesn't, except for he put a kiosk up. I reported something to him at one point. Here was his response, and you have this redacted copy in front of you. This is from Marcus Spiegelberg from the Center of Natural Lands Management. Sorry to hear. I don't have any authority to do anything. I just communicated with the HOA your email and concern and have awaited for their response. The CCNRs give him full authority to act. He just doesn't. So why did Lennar spend $1 million to fund that?
Mr. Root, are you going to make a connection to this workshop tonight?
Yes. I'm pointing out that you don't keep your promises. The view shed that you were shown, that's fantasy. And it was for Sky Ranch, because as you drive by, you can look, and what the HOA did was they just mowed down all of Zone 1, which per code is supposed to be irrigated and ornamentally planted. So the view shed doesn't match what they did. And now you're proposing for Fanita Ranch that you're going to have 8 parks managed by an HOA, and no one provides any oversight? And I'll give some additional photos later.
Thank you.
Dan Bickford.
Well, thank you again. Dan Bickford here. What's not to love about this? I mean, we've got about 2,000 acres of open space and parks and 35-acre park and community farms. You know, unlike some of the other speakers, I did read Fanita Ranch's plan, and they have the migration, animal migration taken into account there. They plan for that. There's big open space right there in the middle of the two villages there, where that's a migration path. You know, the open spaces are not fragmented, not at all. I mean, I know that I'm looking forward. I might not take advantage of the 35 miles of trails. Doesn't look like I'm doing that, but in any case, I will work. Go out to that 35-acre park. Absolutely, I'll make use of that. I love Santee's park system. It's great, well taken care of. Community parks or HOA parks, I'm a little on the fence on that. I want to see how that works, but certainly looking forward to those also. Thank you.
Thank you.
John Olson, and then Justin Slaffley last.
Good evening, Mayor, City Council, and City Manager. I'm trying to keep this quick because I have the under on 11 o'clock. So I'm for Fanita Ranch. I like this project. Throughout the process, or the time that I've lived in Santee, we've always heard about the developers and the mean guys with all the money from New York coming in, doing all the mean stuff, being mean, ornery people, and why don't they do this, and why don't they do that, and why don't they think of all of the wonderful things that HomeFed has thought of to make this a great community that they want to build up there. They have the rights to build on their property, just like you have the rights to build whatever you want to build on your property within the code. For me, it's a land use issue. And if they're willing to fund the improvements to the 52 30 years prior before they're scheduled to be funded, and it's going to cost us a couple more homes and increase our property tax collection and bring in a wealthier clientele into the community, or a resident in the community, that will make everything better for everyone and solve a lot of our problems. Thanks.
Justin Slaffley.
Thank you, Mayor and Council, as well as, and perhaps especially with staff, for these workshops. I think the opportunity to educate citizens on this process and provide feedback, which will presumably help the developer fine-tune the project and really make it a good fit for Santee, is the right way to have a process. I understand there's citizens on both sides, for and against, 100% open space, 76% open space. It all sounds like a good thing to me. I mean, that's a lot of open space. We're really pushing forward the goals of maintaining a livable community, a community where people want to come, that we value parks, that we value open space, and I think that's a lot of what Santee is. So I see this plan very much in the mold of what we want Santee to be, and I like that. Also, through this process, although I don't yet have a final position on Fanita Ranch personally, I'm listening to a lot of these things. I look forward to reading the EIR, which will be prepared. But more and more, I feel like HomeFed is becoming a partner with the community through this process, and that they're really starting to give a very good project. So I'm excited to see that. I also see these tags in the audience, open space for Santee. And a comment was made earlier, and I thought it kind of really resonated with me. Who says no to open space? I think we're all in agreement on that. I think 76%, while maintaining housing and some of the goals that we need with the RENA numbers and everything else, seems like a good balance. Really excited to see the farm element. I know that was profiled at the Santee Street Fair, and they've had kind of demonstration booths and stuff to explain a bit more about that. And that's an exciting element. And I'll stop with one final thought. I hope at the community park that they're putting in, that they put in a very nice concession stand, just like we have at Town Center Park, with some good food and drink options for patrons of the park. Thank you.
No further speakers.
Thank you. Jeff, you want to back up? Do you have any answers to any of those questions?
I have a few.
Okay.
I'll try to be brief. First of all, there were some questions about HOAs and how we're going to manage all the open space and what we are going to do. We've done this before. We've done this at Santee Hills. Santee Hills started in 1998. We have 15 homes left to build out of 3,500. We'll finish those off early next year. Our HOA dues there are $80 a month. The reason they're $80 a month is because we think about the HOA when we're designing things. All the perimeter slopes at Santee Hills, they are managed for fire, brush management, and the brush management zones, but they're all native pallet. We establish them through irrigation, and then when they're established, if you irrigate native plants in the wrong time of the year, you're going to kill them, or they will stunt their growth. We do not water any of the perimeter slopes in Santee Hills anymore. That number one cost for a homeowner association is water. Number two cost is landscape management. You cut those two way down, and your HOA dues will be low. Our HOA is one of the strongest HOAs in California. Every once in a while, they take a break on paying their dues per month because they have more money than they need. And you can use that money to do the open space management and that kind of thing. If you have 1,500 homes, you can only raise half the money as if you have 3,000 homes. So when you start cutting down the number of homes, your amenities go down. I'll go through a few of the questions we had. Talking about conserving 100% of Fanita Ranch. If that happens, it's not open to the public. It's private property. We own it. If the development doesn't go through, there won't be any parks. There won't be any trails. There won't be anyone that goes on to Fanita Ranch anymore. We want to do something for the community. That's why we need our development approved. Then everybody gets to recreate on Fanita Ranch. 67% of our property will be open space preserve. Van was talking about it's going to be closer to 60%. It's 67%, 2/3. The previous developer was half of that, only 50% conserved. Fire breaks. Karen had some question on the fire breaks and the mitigation. Looking at this picture here, it's a little bit small, but that's 3,000 acres there, almost 3,000 acres. And we have there's a corridor that goes underneath Kuimaka. It's a wildlife corridor underneath the road that ties everything together. Between the two development areas is at least 1,000 feet. In most cases, it's close to 1,500 feet. All up the eastern side, there's a 1,000-foot corridor up there as well. It all ties together with Gooden Ranch and all the open space on the Marine Corps Air Station property. Insurance. There was Karen had a big question on insurance, and it's like, to me, if her insurance is going up, I'm not sure what that has to do with our property. We are building up-to-date, cutting-edge homes that will be as fire resistant as they can be. And we're working with insurance companies now. I'm going to speak to Ron, because Ron is in the insurance business, to see what we can do to make it even more affordable for insurance companies to insure properties at Fanita Ranch. We talked a little bit more about the wildlife. I did talk about the wildlife crossings and the conservation measures. How are we going to manage the open space? We are going to do that through our HOA. We're going to have plenty of money because we have the volume of homes to create enough money to hire people to manage the open space. We're going to have a habitat management plan, and we're going to have a restoration plan. The restoration plan is if you've been out there lately or you've seen some of the aerial photographs, there are trails that are getting put in almost daily. 4-wheel drive vehicles are out there. We try to patrol and keep them off as much as possible, but it's difficult. Motorcycles are going over the pristine vegetation and ripping it out. What we are going to do when we get our project approved is have a restoration plan where we take a certain amount of the acreage every year and we restore it. We restore it, so we're going to be planting plantago and other things for the Kino butterfly, for Hermes, what the vegetation they like. We're going to do a certain amount every year until it's all done, and that will be in our restoration plan. And our habitat management plan will be the management plan that manages it all when we're done. Let me see. Someone else was talking about on our trail plan. Our trail plan will be also managed by the HOA, and the landscape. We have landscape people out there on a daily basis, and they will be on the trails every day to see if there's erosion, to see if there are trails that are getting created where they're not supposed to be. As soon as they see them, they shut them down. And by the way, when residents move into a community, they take ownership of that community. So they police the community themselves. If they see something going on that's not supposed to be there, they tell the HOA, and we get it fixed right away. Okay, the farm. There's a question on what are we going to do with the runoff from the farm with fertilizers. It is going to be a biodynamic organic farm. There won't be any toxic fertilizers used in the farm. Ridgetop vernal pools. Most of the vernal pools, and there are vernal pools on Fanita Ranch, are located in the north and the northwesterly corners. Okay, we are preserving as many of the vernal pools as we can, and there you see the little knob at the very top. That is vernal pool central. We are going to create massive vernal pools in that area. Vernal pools can be created. It works all over the place, and we have already been talking to our biologists how we go ahead and do that. Linda mentioned a few things on we could go out there and start building next month. We can't do that, okay? But we could go out there and start building various. We're looking at options. This is our option A and B and C. We do have other options. We could build what's in the general plan, 1,390 or so units. Okay, with that, you're not going to get the freeway improved. You're going to have half the acreage of parks. We're not going to have the revenue coming into the city. Our revenue to the city is going to be northward of $4 million with that plan. You also probably won't have a farm with the 1,395 units. It just doesn't make sense when you cut down the number of units. Allison was talking about the narrow trails. Some trails are going to be narrow, 2 feet wide, single track trails for hiking and biking. Some of them, we want trails for everyone. Some people like to walk on a wide sidewalk through town centers. We're going to have that. We're going to have everything in between. I think that is it. Does the City Council have any other questions? For me?
No, I do have one for Mr. Whalen, though.
Okay,
come back up, Jim. Oh, I'm sorry.
So you said wide sidewalks, and that was actually one of my questions. But I heard 6 foot wide. Is that the widest?
No. And by the way, I forgot, we have been working with Padre Dam. Courtney here is in the audience tonight about working with, it's a win-win situation. We're going to complement the park at Padre Dam, and you're going to complement our park and our development and our trails. To get to your question, Laura, the trails, the concrete trails that are 6 foot, maybe 7 foot wide, those are some of the ones in our town center. The wider trails will be on Cuyamaca and Fanita Parkway. Those are going to be 10 to 12 foot wide. So they have varying widths of trails.
My comment to that would be at Santee Lakes, the old part of Santee Lakes, the east side. Those are all 6 foot wide concrete walking paths, and we found that they're too narrow to handle the kind of foot traffic that you have in a community like that. So that all the sidewalks on the other side, on the west side, are 8 foot wide, and that, the 6 foot wide is wide enough for maybe a stroller and a child, and so 8 foot seems to be the right amount of space. Just some feedback.
Absolutely, and we'll take it into consideration.
And the dog, don't forget that, Laura.
Other questions?
Well, I have the same problem. I mean, Walker Trails is 14 feet. And when you put a bike on one of those things, and so unless you're going to have a separate bike lane, I just don't think they're wide enough, frankly.
And we do have separate bike lanes in most of the areas where we have trails.
Okay.
But well taken, thank you.
But the width that bothers us.
Okay. All right, thank you very much.
Thanks, Jeff. Okay, quick question for you. California Conservation Corps?
Yes.
What kind of work do they do?
Here, the California Conservation Corps is Urban Corps.
Okay.
They're the state chartered entity that fulfills the role of the California Conservation Corps.
Okay. And are they the only ones that are allowed to do like vegetation mitigation with as state permitted?
Oh, no, not at all.
Okay.
There's probably a dozen entities that could manage habitat. And Jeff pretty much put me out of a job with everything he said. He's the first client we've had that's worked on Fanita Ranch that actually absorbed all the conservation issues. The only thing I would add to him is that what he said was that we had DUDAC hand plan every segment of the trails that went in there to make sure that they were sensitive to the environment and over the long haul. The problem with habitat conservation is it's short-term sometimes,
Right.
like the man complained. It's really, you have to take the long haul.
Okay. The reason why I was asking this question is because, if I remember correctly, that is your business is habitat management and some of those things, right?
It's a side business because we had to deal with these small entities. That's the larger ones wouldn't, the small open space areas that the larger habitat managers wouldn't take on. So I also have I hoped that Urban Corps would have a permanent funding source because they're a very, very good program. They take at-risk youth, put them through a GED program, and then they get a trade. One of the trades is, because habitat management is permanent, when you set these endowments up, you get quarterly payments that's used to fund the organization's efforts over time, and they build up a reserve, and if it's done correctly, which we like to think it is, then it works in perpetuity.
Would they be able to do some of the work around, maybe not necessarily inside this footprint, but maybe some of the areas around it that might become over-vegetated or have other problems?
Oh, yes, they do. They do brush clearing. They do channel clearing for drainages, like you have many of them here. And how they work is because they have many unskilled people, they work under the direction of a biologist who's out there with them and say, pick that but not that.
Okay, great. Thank you
Sure.
very much. So, Jeff, can you come back up for a minute, please? Sorry about that. He prompted some questions. So here's my question. Is there any way for you, this is where I do another ask, is there any way for you to set up any kind of endowment to help with doing something like that, to continue mitigating vegetation issues or habitat issues around your development?
Around on our property?
Yeah.
We've talked about that. We have to set up some kind of funding mechanism into perpetuity. There are different ways to do it. You can do it through CFD, you can do it through endowment, or you can do it with a strong HOA, but we need to prove to the wildlife agencies that our HOA, if it goes away, what happens then? And you can do that through a dormant CFD, that if our HOA goes away, then the dormant CFD kicks in. So there are different mechanisms. We're looking into all of them.
So you're already on top of that?
Correct.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Council comments or questions? Anybody?
As far as the home insurance goes, you can get home insurance. So, for that comment, it's if you get non-renewed now in that zone, it's going to happen. People are being non-renewed in northern Santee. That's just part of life. The fire insurance nowadays in East County is California Fair Plan, so that's going to be the part of it. I don't know where they're going to fit in with insurance companies. A lot of the major companies are keeping people. A lot of the smaller companies are bailing quick. So that's what's happening. We've already talked about that before. the trail system, the bike system, again, I think Laura and I both think they're a little small, so if we can increase those, that'd be great. The fire break will address that in the next one. I've beaten that one to death too. And the farm, I'm just curious, if that doesn't make it, beating this one to death too, what happens then?
Steven?
Well, just to look at it on paper, everything does look very nice. I do have a number of concerns. I would say 76% of the land being saved is open space, habitat, parks, and potential farmland. That's definitely an improvement from past applications. Not too crazy about the special use area, but I guess that'll be discussed at a later time. The sections, when we were looking at the before and after, driving down the 125 and having the Vineyard Village, it's going to be pretty far up there on top of that hillside, and I think that'll definitely alter permanently the visual aesthetics of the city of Santee. Many people like having the beautiful views. Of course, it is their private property. It's on our city seal. So hate to see that go. I know Poway's built and San Diego built as far down as they can onto the border to the north. And Santee seems to have been the last area to not build on those hills. Also have concerns about the Orchard Village. It basically on its west side, it buttresses up very closely to the Roy Stoyer treatment facility, which is going to be greatly expanded. I ride on the Stowe Trail almost every Sunday, legally with the pass, and there is a fragrance that comes from treating sewage, and when it is expanded, potentially greatly expanded, there will be quite a bit of fragrance, and I understand that maybe there'll be some sort of deodorizer applied. But either way, what's there is there, whether it's masked or not. The wind typically does blow from west to east, and so that combined with the expansion of the landfill, which will eventually likely be the largest mountain in Mission Trails, the odor will likely drift into the Orchard Village. As far as the commons, the knoll, which is very familiar to the mountain bike community. Just to the west of the knoll, there's an area that has grinding stones, native grinding stones. It doesn't look like that'll likely be saved. It looks to me like there's potentially going to be a sports field put over that. It might be possible for that to be conserved if this plan was to go forward. I think that is an important historical place of significance that is not necessarily well known to the people of Santee and should be preserved. Getting back to the Vineyard Village, it looks great to see all these vineyards on the side. Wow, it's going to be a whole lot of water. It's going to be a whole lot of water, and it's going to forever change the character of the hills to that area. As far as the width of the trails, I know Ron would like everything to be 100 yards wide. I have to disagree. When you go up to those trails and you're mountain biking, you do want a single track. And so you don't, it takes away all of the pleasure of being out there. Everything is a 6 foot wide or 8 foot wide or 10 foot wide decomposed granite trail. So I do appreciate that there will be a variety of trails. A great deal of them will be on current SDG&E easements. The vast majority of the trails to the south of the property, nobody will ever ride anyway. They're too steep. And so, yes, it is open space that's been saved. It is the hillside. And it has limited opportunity for recreation. Although there are a lot of us hardcores that will ride up that mountain and ride down it without killing ourselves. Well, the fact that there is an attempt to try to join the open space to the north and the open space to the southwest, but it does appear that it does fragment the open space greatly. It does have a large perimeter, but I guess we'll be talking about fire and safety at the next meeting. As far as coming up from Cuyamaca, again, there'll be quite a view of the vineyard village. I don't think that's necessarily going to be a huge crowd pleaser for the people of Santee. I do appreciate the fact that HomeFed has done a great deal to try to make this project the best it could possibly be. When it's located in a box canyon on a very heavily congested, in a very heavily congested city, I do appreciate the $4 million that was put forward for the traffic study, which we'll discuss at the next meeting or whatever, the next workshop in January. I think that it's disingenuous to say that that work would not be done if this project was not approved, because that, I believe, is false. I believe that the money that has been put forth by Fanita Ranch is great. However, at this point, we're actually looking to grants from the federal government that likely will not would not be altered based on what happens with Fanita Ranch. So I think that that's disingenuous at best. Along with the fact that, yeah, there was a project for 1,300 plus homes that was approved that also lost when it went to court. So again, I don't believe that 1,300 homes could be built at any time. It would have to go through this whole process yet again. So I don't believe that that those sorts of statements are legitimate and likely should not. I think it's misinformation that should not be spread. Now, having a farm, I think that'd be spectacular. I just don't think that the water's there for it. But I guess when the amount of sewage that's pumped into the treatment sewage plant goes up 15 times what it is now, then maybe there'll be a lot of reclaimed water to use there. However, I do have a lot of concerns about how much water it will take. So I'll leave it at that. But yeah, I'm happy to see this much conservation of land, and also happy to see the extent to try to conserve the trails. And so thank you for that.
Rob? All right, so 76% of open space equals 76% open space. That means it's space that can't be built on. To say it's really going to be 60 or 50 or whatever. No, it's 76. It's 76. You can't build on it. That means it's open space. Whether part of it is a fire buffer or whatever, it's still open space. For us to say that we shouldn't build this because buyers won't buy it, because it's close to noxious odor producing plant, or because it's too high in fire hazard, that's for the buyer to decide. They're going to be presented with all the options that are in front of them. Insurance options are still going to be available, otherwise nobody would be able to buy, because no one can buy a house and not have insurance on it and still be able to finance it. It's impossible. The reason for building on the hilltops is actually to allow for animals to use their natural paths in the valleys. That is their natural source. The reason for the break in the middle was because that is a natural trail for the animals currently. These are the trails that they're already using. These are the paths that they're already using, and that's the reason that they decided to build on the peaks rather than in the valleys, and so that they could preserve the open spaces for the wildlife. I wholeheartedly believe a lot of these arguments all revert, the fire, the noxious odors, the trail stuff, all that just revolves back to it's up to 2,630 homes in my backyard, and I just don't want anything in my backyard. That's what I think most of these arguments break down to, whether people want to admit it or don't want to admit it. That's the reality. You can make this as pretty. They can do everything they want. People are still going to say no, because it's in their backyard and they don't want any more development at all. Period. End of story. I got my house. You shouldn't have yours. And that's just the reality. That's not fair because, as somebody stated earlier, they thought the same thing when all Carlton Hills was built. I didn't want any more development because I've got my house, I don't want you to have yours, and that was in the 80s, 70s. These trails only become accessible, legally accessible, if this project is approved. Should this be defeated, they have the right to fence the entire property and keep everybody out. They've opened this up currently and legally to people that want to utilize the trails, bike, all that stuff, because they're trying to be good neighbors and provide some community spirit and work with the mountain bikers, the hikers, the walkers, all of that stuff in order to, I'm sure, garner some favor from them and in hopes that they will help them in support of this project. I understand why they do it, but that is the reality. If they want to close this up and fence it off, it's their right. It's their property. I saw when Jeff was up here talking about that very thing, I saw a few people in the audience going, so what? Okay, who cares? The same people that were saying, well, we need these trails. And that brings me back to, it's 2,630 homes. That's the real reason. Who maintains, who's going to look out for the camping on the project and loitering on the project? Who's doing that now? Currently, there's nobody up there to do that. It's private property. We could have encampments up there, kids starting fires, doing silly things, all that stuff all day long. It would take way longer to find that and deal with it than it ever would if there was development up there because, as the applicant stated, neighbors take care of their own property. Neighbors take care of their backyard. Neighbors are looking out for this stuff, and they're guarding for that. Who would maintain that if it was just a nature center? We're not going to be able to pay for anybody as a free nature center. Nobody's going to be out there maintaining and looking and making sure there's no camping or anything of the nature. And just for the record, the previous project lost in court because the developer went bankrupt prior to being able to go back and fight against it and fight the concerns for the fire issues. There were 2 fire chiefs, our own and another outside specialist, that both stated that the project was safe from fire. The judge wanted more information on that and wanted to challenge that. The applicant went bankrupt prior to being able to go back and rebut it. So that's the reason it died. It wasn't because it was defeated by the courts and anybody beat it down. It was, they went bankrupt. That's the real reason it died when it died. If the new developer wants to come back and go after that same project the same way, all they would have to do is just deal with that, and they're moving forward in that manner. So those are the realities.
All right, so full disclosure, in 1982, I was on a mountain bike in the Julian Mountains, yes, and at about 40 miles an hour, took a nasty fall and shredded off my kneecap. Still pulling out asphalt to this day, so I'm not a mountain biker. And no, I'm not much of a bike rider at all. But that being said, I've been a part of the Stowe Trail Task Force since 2016 as a park director. Stowe Trail runs right alongside of Santee Lakes. Actually, I was a part of that task force before the city of Santee got involved with that task force, because at a certain point when Fanita Ranch Home Fed was willing to share an easement and reroute the route, the city of Santee needed to be involved in the task force to make that happen. So I've been a part of the conversation with the trail system for almost as long as I've been the park director, and you know, this is the county of San Diego, the city of San Diego, Miramar, Santee Lakes, Padre Dam, different developers, all working together to make these trail connections happen. Yeah, absolutely. And I learned a lot about being on that task force. And so I was really glad that Ben Stone showed up tonight to talk about what the mountain bikers actually feel about the trail system, because that's really important for this conversation tonight. So them working with Home Fed on the development is important. There's a big community out here. I wish more mountain bikers were here tonight to talk about this, because there is a big active community in Santee that this is really important to them. And connecting the Stowe Trail, they've been working on this just as long as, Home Fed's probably been working on trying to get their development built. They've been trying to connect the trails just as long, and they're just as passionate. So this looks to me like, you've worked out something that will be that final connection. My understanding from being on the task force is there's one small sliver of a property left on the west side, a little bit south of Santee Lakes, south of Miramar. One property owner that is a holdout, but people are still riding through his property illegally anyway, because they're not stopping the people on the trail. So that's my comment about the trail system. And we've heard enough about it tonight, so I think I'll leave it there.
Well, thank you. I was here when Barrett proposed their plan, and I heard many of the same concerns then as I do now. Something that I asked Barrett to do was to sit down with the environmental community, people that wanted to use this area for trails and things, and they had some conversations, but not many. And then I asked Home Fed to do the same thing, and I know that you've had several different environmental groups at the table discussing these things. I find it, I don't know, I guess quite nice that you're willing to actually even create vernal pools, because I know that's been discussion for a long time. And we know that vernal pools are caused by many things. There may be some natural things that occur. A stone may have dropped somewhere sometime and left an impression and then washed away, and then or things of that nature. One of those motorcyclists on the property illegally could have driven through an area that had a depression, left a graded depression, and it rained, and now that's a vernal pool. How that can happen, I think people who created those rules that said that's a vernal pool probably did that because that's their preference versus what reality should be. Motorcycle tires aren't nature. That doesn't create things like that, in my opinion. But that's just me. I think the fact that you're looking at putting vineyards up there, for somebody to say that pardon me, Stephen, to say that that's going to ruin the view, I beg you to go to maybe Italy or someplace where those are what thousands, if not millions, of people over years have gone to those regions to see the vineyards, and so I think I know I've gone many places throughout the state of California just to see where the vineyards are. They're beautiful, especially when they're in bloom. So I think they're going to really enhance the hillside, especially when they are in bloom, and we're just going to have to disagree on that one. I think that this is our third workshop, and I find it very interesting that we're actually doing this, to be quite honest. Because normally what we do is we wait for all the studies to come in, the environmental impact report to be finished, and then a 45-day public review, and that really doesn't give us a chance to look at anything. But we're getting that an opportunity ahead of here. I know that when this comes actually before us to make a decision, I'm going to be better informed on it. I would hope that the rest of the council is better informed on it. I would hope that the community is better informed. I'm not in a position, though, to say yeah, I know some people would like to hear us say, oh yeah, I'm voting for this thing, or no, I'm not voting for it, but there's not enough information to do that now. This is just a collection of information for all of us. So, but I do like what I see, Jeff. And, you know, I had no idea that Mr. Whalen was working on this project. And be honest with you, I saw, that's why I asked him to come up. It's because I know he's been working in this, you know, area for a long time. We've had those conversations. And I know what your preference is on making sure the habitat is safe and secure. So I think that was a good choice, having him come on board. And regardless of, you know, what anybody says, we're still going to hold your feet to the fire and make sure that it's a quality project. So that's all I have to say about that. So let's note and file that, I guess. Thank you very much, everybody, for your comments, and thank you for staying so late. Appreciate it. Oh yeah, yeah. Wait a minute. You can stay. You can stay. We'll keep. I'll give.